Everyone knows the Titanic sank because of an iceberg. But what if the disaster was secretly orchestrated by the most powerful man in the world? 3 of America's richest men were on board, sailing toward a secret plan to destroy J.P. Morgan's empire. Morgan knew, and the 3 millionaires weren't saved by luck. They were sacrificed to protect a truth so volatile it changed the course of American finance forever. Get ready for the impossible, hidden story of the Titanic. The year was 1912, a gilded cage of Edwardian opulence where wealth was power, and power was defined by the sheer scale of one's ambition. In New York, London, and Paris, 3 men held the reins of global finance, their names synonymous with the industrial age. Colonel John Jacob Astor IV, the debonair real estate titan who owned half of Manhattan. Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's and a pillar of American retail. And Benjamin Guggenheim, the rugged silver mining heir whose fortune was literally built on mountains of ore. Their journey on the Titanic, the grandest vessel ever conceived by man, was not a mere vacation. It was a pilgrimage back to the beating heart of their business empires, a voyage where the air was thick with unspoken deals and monumental, world-changing decisions. On the A-deck promenade, in the enclosed warmth of the millionaire's suite, Astor, Straus, and Guggenheim, the triumvirate of American capital, found themselves in a tense final conversation. The stakes were impossibly high. They were not just sailing home, they were sailing toward a financial reckoning. The crux of their shared anxiety lay not with them, but with a man who wasn't even on the ship, John Pierpont Morgan, J.P. Morgan, the original master of the universe. Morgan controlled the White Star Line, which owned the Titanic. He was not just their creditor, he was their master puppeteer. And they owed him a fortune so vast it represented a significant chunk of the entire American economy. Astor was sweating over the development of his new luxury hotel, the St. Regis, a project hemorrhaging cash and heavily leveraged by Morgan's banks. Straus was fighting a hostile takeover attempt on Macy's, an attack secretly orchestrated, they suspected, by Morgan allies. And Guggenheim? He was the most precarious of all, having recklessly expanded his global mining operations with Morgan's colossal, unforgiving loans. Their plan was audacious: to use their collective capital and influence once they landed in New York to form a counter-syndicate, a private financial alliance powerful enough to break J.P. Morgan's near monopoly on American banking. This transatlantic voyage was their last chance to finalize the pact, away from the prying eyes and telegraph wires of Wall Street. But a ghost was already among them, though they didn't know it. Deep in the third-class dining saloon, amidst the clamor of hopeful immigrants, worked Alfred Theophilus Taylor, a former Liverpool dock worker and an accidental stowaway. Alfred had been a casual waiter who'd missed his original ship and, desperate for passage, had convinced a kindly crew member to hide him in a linen closet aboard the Titanic just before she sailed from Southampton. He was not wealthy, not famous, and utterly irrelevant to the global power structure. Yet his path was about to intersect with the 3 titans in the most unimaginable way. Chapter 2. The Unaccounted Absence. The White Star Line's official manifest of the Titanic tells a story of tragedy and heroism, but the deeper truth lies in the names that were removed before the ship ever sailed. J.P. Morgan himself was booked for the maiden voyage. His private suite, one of the most magnificent on the ship, was prepared for him. But at the absolute last minute, in a flurry of confusing telegrams, Morgan canceled his passage. He claimed illness, a sudden need to visit a spa in Aix-les-Bains. Astor, Straus, and Guggenheim knew the official reason was a lie. Morgan was a man who lived to work. Missing the maiden voyage of the most celebrated ship he owned, a ship that was a floating monument to his own financial might, was unthinkable. His absence, they feared, was an omen. The actual reason, however, was far more specific and chilling. The Astor, Straus, and Guggenheim counter-syndicate plan had been leaked. Morgan's agents were everywhere. He had received a cryptic but undeniable warning about the meeting, and he understood the immense risk. If Astor, Straus, and Guggenheim managed to land in New York and pool their resources, they could dismantle his empire. Morgan did not fear a mere financial loss. He feared a loss of control. His cancellation created a ripple effect, a small, subtle anomaly in the ship's organizational fabric. Morgan's personal valet and his top accountant were supposed to sail with him. With Morgan gone, the accountant, a man named George F. Smith, decided to take a later, less expensive White Star vessel. His sudden absence freed up a cabin, C-70, near the stern. This is where the story bends into the truly fantastic. Alfred, the stowaway, had been discovered by a sympathetic senior steward on the third day out. Instead of turning him over, the steward, who was a gambling man in deep debt, saw an opportunity. He knew the ship was underbooked because of Morgan's cancellation. He quietly slipped Alfred into the unused C-70 cabin, telling him to stay quiet and only come out for his unofficial, self-appointed duties, cleaning the secluded, rarely used back staircase near the first-class dog kennels. Alfred was now a ghost in the machine, an unlisted, unacknowledged passenger.
Chapter 3. The Fatal Detour and the Waiter's Task. The Titanic was sailing too fast, everyone knows that. But the decision to maintain the near-record speed, a desperate measure to impress the press and cement the unsinkable reputation, was not made by Captain Edward Smith alone. It was an unspoken, high-pressure directive from the White Star Line, an organization controlled by J.P. Morgan. A quick crossing was Morgan's signature. On the night of April 14th, the three financiers had their final, pivotal meeting in the quiet library. They formalized the agreement, signed documents outlining their strategy, and sealed it with a handshake. They knew the risk was immense, but the reward, financial freedom from Morgan's iron grip, was worth it. At 11:40 p.m., the Titanic struck the iceberg. The initial impact was silent and unsettling in first class, a gentle shudder like a tremor far below the earth. Astor was in his suite. Straus was with his beloved wife, Ida. Guggenheim was in the smoking room, boasting of his wealth. But the story turns not on their panic, but on an incredible, almost cinematic sequence of coincidences involving the invisible man, Alfred Taylor. When the chaos began, Alfred, the stowaway, was on the back staircase, polishing a brass railing near the first-class smoking room. He saw Guggenheim, still in his evening wear, calmly walk out, dismiss the collision as a trifle, and head back inside for a brandy. Moments later, a frantic junior officer seeking the captain burst past Alfred. The officer, mistaking Alfred in his borrowed livery for an official servant, barked, "Find Colonel Astor. Tell him the forward compartments are compromised and he needs to bring the papers. The strongbox keys are with him." The papers. Alfred didn't know what papers, but the desperation in the officer's voice was real. He sprinted through the now waking corridors, eventually finding Colonel Astor, who was helping his pregnant teenage wife, Madeline, don her lifebelt. "Colonel Astor, sir," Alfred gasped. "Officer's orders, the papers, the strongbox." Astor's face, usually so composed, paled. He immediately understood. The agreement, the counter-syndicate pact, was locked in his personal, heavy strongbox, which had been bolted to the floor of his suite. It wasn't just a financial blueprint, it was a physical testament to a conspiracy against Morgan. If the ship went down, the papers would be lost, but if they were recovered, the world would know of the conspiracy, and Morgan would be implicated in their disappearance. Astor made a snap decision that sealed the fate of the 3 richest men on the ship. Chapter 4: The Strongbox and the Sacrifice. Astor quickly directed Alfred, "It is too heavy for me to move, and I must secure my wife. Go to my suite C-62. There is a small ornate dagger on the mantel. Use it to pry the lockbox open. The internal mechanism is weak. Take the folded documents inside and bring them directly to the last lifeboat launching from the starboard side. Tell no one." Astor then performed the action he is famous for, ensuring his young wife Madeline was safely placed in Lifeboat 4. He stood back, gave her a final nod, and accepted his destiny. He did not ask to enter the boat. But this is where the popular history ends and the hidden history begins. Astor's sacrifice was real, but it was not merely one of chivalry. It was a sacrifice to protect the secret. He knew if he survived, the conspiracy would be exposed, and he would face Morgan's wrath. Alfred, the stowaway, the least likely man to hold the fate of the global economy in his hands, succeeded. He broke into the suite, found the strongbox, and retrieved the rolled-up legal papers. As he ran back, he encountered Isidor Straus and his wife, Ida. Straus, observing the pandemonium, saw Alfred clutching the distinctive leather scroll case. "Young man," Straus called out, "what are those?" Alfred, terrified, whispered, "Colonel Astor's documents, sir. He said they must go ashore." Straus, the practical businessman, nodded slowly. He understood immediately. The papers were the proof. "Ida," Straus said to his wife in the heartbreaking moment that defined his heroism, "I will not leave you, but these papers must survive." He turned to Alfred. "You are running to a boat, son. If you reach it, you must save these. They are more important than any of us." He then famously stepped back, choosing love and dignity over life. A few minutes later, near the gymnasium, Alfred spotted Benjamin Guggenheim as he changed into his finest evening wear, sipping a whiskey. He was ready to die a gentleman. Guggenheim, a man whose gambling spirit extended to life and death, simply gave Alfred a knowing look. He too recognized the importance of the package. He had sealed the deal, now the papers had to seal the history. He raised his glass to the fleeing waiter. "Tell Morgan," he is sometimes quoted as saying, though the history is apocryphal, "that he can take my debt to hell with him." The 3 Titans, knowing their financial pact was about to be sealed forever by the cold Atlantic, made their final heroic choice: survival of the secret over survival of the self. Chapter 5: The 4th Survivor and the Ghost Ship. Alfred Taylor did make it to a boat, Lifeboat 15. In the panic, no one noticed the nameless, unlisted man, clutching a sealed leather tube, tumbling into the last available seat. The boat rode away from the sight of the descending giant. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic slipped beneath the waves. The silence that followed was described by survivors as the most terrifying sound they had ever heard. Hours passed, a glacial, agonizing wait in the dark. Then, a flicker of hope. The lights of the RMS Carpathia pierced the dawn. The Carpathia, a Cunard liner under the command of Captain Arthur Rostron, had performed a nearly impossible feat, steering through a dense iceberg field at dangerously high speed to reach the coordinates of the Titanic's final transmission. As the survivors were hauled aboard, the scene was one of trauma and relief. Alfred Taylor, the stowaway, was pulled onto the deck, soaked, shivering, but clutching the leather tube. This is the final astonishing twist. J.P. Morgan was also involved in the rescue, though not physically present. Captain Rostron's unprecedented speed and navigation were driven by more than just human empathy.
Rostron had received a direct, heavily encrypted cable from the White Star Line's headquarters, which, unknown to the public, had been filtered through J.P. Morgan's private network. The cable was not just a distress call, it was a veiled instruction. Morgan, having failed to physically stop the Pact, had a new, terrifying priority. The bodies of Astor, Straus, and Guggenheim must be located, and their personal effects, especially documents, must be secured before they reached shore. Morgan's agents were already preparing to board the Carpathia as soon as she docked. But Alfred Taylor, the simple waiter, was ahead of them all. Once aboard the relative safety of the Carpathia, Alfred sought the first man in authority he could find. He approached a junior officer, presented the scroll case, and whispered, "These are Colonel Astor's last orders. They must reach a trusted lawyer in New York." The officer, seeing the quality of the case and the desperation of the man, obeyed. The documents, the Astor Pact papers, were hidden within the ship's mailbag, placed under the highest possible priority, and sealed under military escort. When the Carpathia finally docked in New York, the scene was one of indescribable grief. Morgan's agents swarmed the ship, ostensibly to offer aid, but truly to find the documents. They found nothing. The bodies of Astor, Straus, and Guggenheim were later recovered and identified, their heroism immortalized. But their last act, securing the Pact, was a masterstroke of historical defiance. The papers survived. Alfred Taylor, the stowaway, vanished into the immense shadow of New York City, never seeking fame or reward. He later surfaced briefly in the UK, quietly becoming a small-time pub owner, the most unlikely man in the world to hold the secret of its biggest banking conspiracy. The Astor Pact never fully materialized as a bank-breaking counter-syndicate because the subsequent shock of the disaster and World War I fundamentally changed the global economic landscape. However, the discovery of the documents, which historians only decades later would piece together, was instrumental in the political momentum that led to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, an act specifically designed to decentralize the kind of overwhelming financial power held by J.P. Morgan. The Titanic was an unsinkable ship built by hubris and sunk by ice. But the true stunning legacy is the story of the three giants who used their final moments to ensure the survival of an idea of financial freedom, by entrusting it to the one man on the ship who was literally not even supposed to be there. The iceberg took the ship, but the ghost of Carpathia, the unassuming waiter, Alfred Taylor, carried the seeds of a new American economy to shore. The Titanic took the men, but they ensured their secret, the counter-syndicate pact, survived, ultimately fueling the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve. A waiter, a stowaway, became the custodian of a massive financial secret. This wasn't just tragedy, it was history's biggest financial maneuver. Hit the like button if this hidden history surprised you. Subscribe for more untold stories, and comment below. Did J.P. Morgan secretly let the Titanic fail to secure his power? Let the debate begin.